Hey everybody, it's Josh Runquist back here with Heavy Debriefings and another Bracket Fight. As this one was a part suggestion from my YouTube comments and also something I've wanted to do for quite a bit as well, I figured this would be the first interview in a new series of videos I'm probably going to be recording in a row. Right after I gave myself a nice little trim up to try to get the beard back to normal and try to make my hair make me look more like a metal god and less like a homely man. I have failed. But hey, I am back to my normal negative 6 out of 10 look, so... Anyways, this is a bracket fight I found about prog metal albums, and this one looked very intriguing to me. I don't know what's a part of it here. I left it right at this part that you see right behind me on the screen. I noticed there's a couple poop emojis, which seems to always be the case with bracket fights. But I am very excited to see what will happen here. As some of you may know, prog metal is near and dear to my heart. I'm not as big into progressive metal as I was to begin with, but I still have my passion for it, and I hope I know all these bands. I don't know what's on here, I haven't looked, but I'm gonna go ahead and do some shuffle seating, so I have no idea what's going on. I see there's album switching right there. I don't want to know what it is, so I'm looking right at the camera, Always on God's camera. Alright. So, no more dilly-dally. Let's get into it. Fuck. Starting right off with my favorite album from Between the Buried and Me, Colors, and my favorite Opeth album, Blackwater Park. Well, I got some egg on my face, don't I? Well, I guess to start things off, I should say that the adult contemporary progressive death metal album used to describe this exact album from 2007 is near and dear to my heart. It is the very first album I've ever seen live in its entirety. It's where I met a good friend of mine, Kyle. It was one of the last shows I got to see with a good high school friend of mine named Mike, and it was at the Triple Rock Social Club in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is no longer with us. But it was a very great time being able to see the album in its entirety during the first go-around. Whereas Opeth's Blackwater Park was a bigger impact on me at first. A song like Bleak really changed my perspective on how music could be done. It introduced me to Steven Wilson, and I was able to discover Steven Wilson and Porcupine Tree thanks to Blackwater Park. And it really did help shift everything that mattered to me when it came to progressive metal in its entirety. So, yeah, Between the Buried and Me and Opeth and Between the Buried and Me. This is not an easy choice for me. A very unfair one. Very, very unfair. But these kind of mishaps will happen eventually. But with that said, I have to go with the one that means more near and dear to me. And it's always going to have a place in my heart with Blackwater Park. I apologize to Colors. You are still one of my favorite albums of all time, but Blackwater Park sadly does defeat you. Tool Lateralis versus Operation Mindcrime. A band that is the equivalent of Walking Through the Desert, where Queensryche, when you look at their whole discography, is the great definition of a roller coaster with so many great highs and so many lows. But thankfully, this is one of the greatest Queensryche albums. And I don't just say that because of it being a concept album. I don't say it because it's arguably their biggest album, this or Empire, depending on how you look at things. Yeah, I gotta go Queensryche because I'm just never gonna be into Tool the way everyone else is. Ooh, Leprous, Tall Poppy Seeds versus Animals as Leader's self-titled album. Well, this is gonna be a fun one to explain. With Animals as Leaders, this is the only Animals as Leaders album that I enjoy from start to finish without feeling the antsy to want to listen to something else. Animals as Leaders is that perfect band that sounds great for a few songs before you just want to listen to something else. There's nothing wrong with the musicianship, it's top notch. There's nothing wrong with their style, they have a great mix of gent, jazz, progressive metal, and being able to spread their wings, especially in the latter parts of the band right now. And I will say the song CAFO, or is it CAFO? I don't know. That has one of my favorite guitar solos of all time. You know the solo I'm talking about. Whereas with Leprous, this is the album that got me into the band. And they are a band that has shifted so much over the years. I mean, of course, right now they're really experimenting with their sound, going more electronic, a little more poppy, a little more rocky, and not really hitting the metal tinges that they have in the past. But this album is full of that great progressive metal, just on the cusp of being Isan's backing band live. So much to love about this one. Whereas I have one definitive song off this album that is always going to be near and dear to me. This entire Leprous album is what got me into Leprous, so yeah, I'm going to go Leprous. Alright, Protest the Hero. In what might be their biggest album with Fortress, another album I've been able to see in its entirety, the last show that I ever saw with friends. Oh, doesn't that sound sad? Versus Citadel from Lascaris, which I feel is the high watermark of the band so far. In complete transparency, there are other albums I love from Protest the Hero more than Fortress. For example, I love Kazaya, the album that most people seem to ignore more than Fortress. Fortress is a great album from start to finish, and especially after seeing it live, I have a new appreciation for it. Whereas with Lascaris and Citadel, there's some behind-the-scenes stuff that I'm just not going to talk about. But Citadel is always going to be an album that I love. From start to finish, it just is the perfect definition of what I wanted the band to be, what the band wanted to be. And of course, they did one album since then, and they should be having another one out, I'm assuming sometime next year. Earn had some stuff in my life that, again, I'll just fade out talking about it. But Citadel, I still have the wall hanger. It used to be up behind me before it fell, and I've been too lazy and depressed to pick it up. But I'm still gonna go with Citadel by Lascaris. They are really hitting me here. Death, The Sound of Perseverance, my very first Death album, versus the debut album from Periphery, which is, let's face it, a Misha kind of solo album. I mean, it's basically almost all his songs before P2 really started to introduce the whole band as a whole. I mean, it's programmed drums, not to throw any shade towards anybody, but, and of course, if you didn't know that, it doesn't even really sound like programmed drums, but they are. But there's some songs on there that I just love. The first two Periphery albums are always going to mean something near and dear to me. It just is. But Death may be one of, if not my favorite band of all time, the more that I think about it. And I know a lot of people like to crap all over the more progressive side of Death, especially when Chuck changed his voice from the low growl to the more high pitch. But this is also the first album from Richard Christie with Death, obviously the last album from Death, but, you know, being able to work with him with Control Denied, and then being able to continue on with his career now with Howard Stern. But this is the drumming progressive metal album versus an album that was programmed. So if I want to look at it from just the drumming showcase, I gotta go Death. If I want to look at it from what band I love more, I gotta go Death. If I want to look at it for albums that mean more to me, I gotta go Death. And if I just want to choose my favorite album of these two, I'm going Death. Oh, wow, Edge of Sanity, Crimson, and Mastodon's Crack the Sky. Well, wellity. Another album I got to see in its entirety. I tried to get my friend Mike to go with me to go see this, but he backed out the day of. That was fun. And then, of course, Edge of Sanity's Crimson, album that will never be heard live, is probably my favorite of these two. At one point in time, I would have said Crack the Sky. I mean, it is at one point one of my favorite progressive metal albums of all time. It has fallen probably into third place now for my favorite Mastodon album, whereas Edge of Sanity's Crimson and Crimson 2 are the standard bearers of what progressive death metal has become. So, yeah, Crimson. And wow, this is really a tough one. And oh, okay, repeats here. Gonna be starting that off, Death Symbolic and Dream Theater's Awake. I'm just gonna keep this one a bit shorter. Symbolic means more to me than Awake. Eson's After versus Images and Words. After is an album that really helped me appreciate more experimental stuff. From the saxophones to genre bending to so many things that happened with this album. There's so much to love about it. And Eson's solo material. I mean, obviously I heard his solo material before, which didn't hit me as hard until After came out. After is a pinnacle album, and everything from this point forward really showed off everything that Eson is all about. Whereas Dream Theater's Images and Words might be my favorite progressive metal, straight up progressive metal album of all time. And this list is so much harder than I thought it was going to be. Holy jumped up fucking Jesus. But that said, I'm going to go Images and Words, and this tier list is not fair. Here we go again. Blackwater Park versus Operation Mindcrime. Gotta go Blackwater Park. Tall Poppy Syndrome versus Citadel. Going Citadel. The Sound of Perseverance versus Crimson. Oh. Okay. Crimson. Symbolic versus Images and Words. Like, I feel like this is so unfair. As Death, like I mentioned, is one of my favorite bands of all time. And I just had it lose to Edge of Sanity. And now Death may lose again to Images and Words, which is my favorite progressive metal album of straight up material, where it shows in this list it's not just straight up progressive metal, they're showing the progressive death metal, they're showing gent, they're showing all these different sides. It's not fair to Death, they have 7 perfect albums, but Symbolic is just not there for me the way that Images and Words has been. Opeth versus Diablo Scaris. Yeah, again, Blackwater Park. Oh. To anyone that doesn't know, Edge of Sanity and everything Dan Swano related, I've become a bigger fan of with every subsequent year. And I've gotten to talk to him twice, and I just appreciate him more every time that I get the opportunity to be able to talk to him. Him, just like Devin Townsend, just like Steven Wilson, and so many others, that is not just a multi-instrumentalist and a producer, but has an amazing voice, knows how to write amazing material, and Crimson is like pinnacle Edge of Sanity for me, and the standard bearer of progressive death metal. And I'm trying to think about that now compared to Images and Words, which I can't stress enough is my favorite progressive metal album. But I also gotta look at this from my point of view as well. I mean, obviously that's the whole point of the brackets fights, isn't it? Not just what's more legendary, what's more popular. No, you don't need to do that. I mean, if Maiden's gonna be on here and you choose Maiden over all these just because they're Maiden, you need to fix your priorities. See, Images and Words does hold that special place in my heart. It does. And it always will. But the more I listen to Crimson, the more that I love it, the more that I appreciate it, and it is the kind of album that could knock Images and Words out of its place. And I listen to Crimson a lot more than I do Images and Words nowadays. Dream Theater and Images and Words held that place in my heart and helped me get through so many great moments in my life, whereas Crimson is helping me out more now. And I can already see this rifling some feathers up, but I'm gonna go Crimson. Or am I gonna go Magician? No, I'm gonna go Crimson. And now Blackwater Park versus Crimson. If I was a weaker man, this would be alcohol. Funny enough, Opeth wouldn't be where they are without Dan Swano, since he helped produce the first 2 Opeth albums. And you can say that Edge of Sanity kind of influenced the sound of Opeth into what they've become. I mean, if there was no Opeth, I feel like Edge of Sanity would be the biggest progressive death metal band to ever exist. But again, like, Opeth, with Deliverance and especially Blackwater Park, is the reason I appreciate growls and screams and appreciate the more extreme side of metal. Whereas Edge of Sanity is a band I gravitate towards more now than I have overall in my life. And I think it's important to recognize the past, but not always hold it into the highest regards, because a lot of times the past isn't as great as you remember it for various different reasons, and you gotta live for the here and for the now. So on the left side of this bracket, going with Edge of Sanity. And I'm so curious, and I can't wait to see what's on the right side of this bracket. Ooh, Haken Visions versus... Oh, Vector. Okay, Haken. Oh, no. Traced in Air by Cynic versus Arion with Flight of the Navigator. Oh. I guess what makes this one a bit easier is Traced in Air is one of those albums that changed who I am as a person, whereas this is a spectacular Arion album, and highly recommend it. But with that said, I have to go with my heart. I'm going with Traced in Air. Oh, Meshuggah? Okay, well, I guess we're going with Edge of Sanity again, aren't we? Focus versus Fate's Warning, and probably my least favorite of the John Arch era Fate's Warning albums, so I guess we're gonna go Focus. Voivod, and I can't really read it because my eyes are shitty, versus Symphony X's 5, or V, depending on how you look at it. Yeah, Symphony X. Pain of Salvation Scarsick versus another... No, wait, that's Black Future. That is Vector, so yeah, without question, Pain of Salvation. Another Voivod versus Devin Townsend with Ocean Machine. At one point in time, Tyria was my favorite Devin Townsend album, and that made me a weirdo. Over time, I started to appreciate Ocean Machine more and more, and I think it is my favorite Devin Townsend album of everything. So, and Voivod, a band that I highly, highly respect, but I can't say no to Devin Townsend. Devin Townsend Empath versus my favorite Fate's Warning of Waken the Guardian. Well, of the John Arch era. Yeah, especially after seeing this album live at Prog Power, which just so happened to be the same time that I saw Devin Townsend with Annika Vang and Giersbergen. Yeah, just to be a little saucy, I'm gonna go with Waken the Guardian. Here we go, Haken versus Cynic. This'll be easy. Not my favorite Haken album versus my favorite Cynic album. Edge of Sanity versus Focus. Oh, look, Crimson might win this whole goddamn thing, so I don't think it's fair to lead another Edge of Sanity album on. So right now, I'm gonna go Focus. Symphony X versus Scarsick. Oh, Pain of Salvation. I know this is the definition of a love-hate Pain of Salvation album. This is an album people either love or hate, or think is okay. But seriously, I mean, when they basically made an album that talked about all of the criticisms of America, and rightfully so. In 2007, people didn't want to hear this shit. Looking at it now in 2022, Daniel Gillenlow nailed it. And this is not my favorite Symphony X album. Scarsick is not my favorite Pain of Salvation album either, but it's pretty high up there, so yeah, I'm gonna go Scarsick. Ocean Machine versus Waken the Guardian. Yeah, Ocean Machine. Traced in Air versus Focus. I gotta go Traced in Air. Scarsick versus Ocean Machine. I'm going Ocean Machine. And now Focus versus Ocean Machine, which is just a baffling ordeal trying to choose one or the other. I wish with these bracket fights they would stick to one album per band. I mean, you had 2 Death albums, you had 2 Devin Townsend, you had 2 Cynic albums. I mean, why not just pick other progressive metal bands? There's so many out there to be able to choose from. Oh, but an album that I grew to love more and more and more over time versus an album that I love from beginning to end, doesn't overstay its welcome. Just a nice little chunk of change with 7 songs at a perfect length. And I pretty much seen every song off the album, even though I've only seen the band once. They didn't play the album in its entirety, but they pretty much did, as they pretty much almost did everything off of Focus and Traced in Air and their Carbon-Based Anatomy EP, which, you know, with their material being so short at the time, it was able to fit everything in there, which was mighty nice. But I gotta give it to Devin Townsend and make one of the hardest decisions I have to make in the finals. Here we go, Crimson versus Ocean Machine. Oh, man. Oh. My justification for this, starting with Ocean Machine, which I do feel nowadays is a perfect album from start to finish. There's some things I might change, but if I do change, it would take away that perfect value of what Ocean Machine is. Whereas with Edge of Sanity, it is a perfect 44-minute album called Crimson. Depending on how you listen to it, it's either 1 track or split into 8 tracks. I listen to it in its own entity, and there's nothing I would take out of the song. So I'm going to go with my gut here, my mind, and my penis. And I'm going to go with Edge of Sanity's Crimson for the win. And as either the website or my computer is failing me, just like it has for the last few bracket fights, you can see right here that Edge of Sanity's Crimson is the winner of this progressive metal album bracket fight. This was really fun to do, even though I found it to be very, very, very unfair to someone of my taste. It very well could have changed in 2 different ways. And thank you very much for tuning in for this shorter version of the bracket fight. I'll be back again with this because these are very fun to do. It's very fun to see my natural reactions to see how all of these go, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. I don't need to tell you to like, comment, and subscribe. You're going to if you want to, but if you feel like helping me out. And until next time, for Heavy Debriefings, this is Josh Ronquist saying, see ya.